G'day. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Lockstitch key and the reverse key. I'm going to start with the reverse key, which is pretty basic, and then move along to the Lockstitch key. And finally we're going back to the reverse key because there are some things it does that are really quite surprising. This is my reverse key and this is my Lockstitch key. So we're going to look first at the reverse key. We're on straight stitch. Essentially, whenever I hold the reverse key in, the machine goes in reverse. Whenever I let it go, the machine goes in forward. If I go to zigzag, it does the same. And that is essentially what the reverse key does. When you're doing reverse, you'll notice that quite often the stitches do not go down in exactly the same place as they went down when they were going forward. And that's because the machine is designed to pull the fabric in one particular direction and it's harder for it to push it away. But essentially that's what it is. It also only works on the utility stitches. So we're looking here at straight stitch, zigzag. I think the 3-step zigzag, it'll try and follow those backwards and forwards, but it can't do it on a really complicated stitch. I'm back on straight stitch and now I'm going to use the Lockstitch key. So as I'm sewing along, when I press the Lockstitch key, the machine does several stitches in the one spot to lock off. I had to keep my foot on the foot control until it had finished. So I'll show you what happens if I don't. So I'm going to start sewing. I stopped, or I took my foot off before it had finished. When I move somewhere else, the machine has just finished that lock stitch in a different place. So it didn't know that I had moved. It was just knowing it had to do a couple more stitches there to finish that lock stitch. It is important to leave your foot down until the lock stitch is completed. Now with the zigzag, zigzags have a lock stitch built into the start of them. So let's get going. I haven't done a lock stitch. When I carry on, it just keeps doing zigzag. If I do a lock stitch now, the machine now knows it has finished. When I go to start again, it knows it has to start with another lock stitch. So telling it to do a lock stitch tells it that it's finished what it's doing, it's going back to the beginning of the pattern again. The most important thing for you to know about lock stitch is that you have to keep your foot on the accelerator until it is finished. If you don't, when you go somewhere else, it will want to finish that lock stitch that you didn't let it finish. I have now set the machine to doing a pattern that looks like a leaf. So let's see how it works. If I stop during the pattern and keep going, it just keeps going. I am going to now do a lock stitch. The machine finished off the pattern before it did the lock stitch. So on the majority of stitches on the machine, it will finish a pattern before it does its lock stitch. If I'm doing the stretch stitch for blind hem, it also finishes the pattern. On a blind hem, the machine takes it a little bit past and back to the right hand side. That left extension of the stitch is where you are going through the right side of the fabric, and the bigger you make that, the more noticeable it is on the right side of the garment. So they don't want to do that, they want to have it out of the way, and that's why it goes that little bit further. But what happens when you want to lock off halfway through a pattern? I'm going to go back to this one because it's a little bit longer. So I can get it to do a lock stitch partway through a pattern by hitting the reverse key instead of the lock stitch key. And again, it will go back to the beginning now. And wherever I am in that pattern, when I touch that reverse key, we will have half or whatever part of the pattern done rather than going to the end of a pattern. So lock stitch on a utility stitch will lock you off straight away. Lock stitch on a decorative stitch will take you to the end of a pattern. Reverse key on a utility stitch will take you backwards, and reverse key on a decorative stitch will lock you off exactly where you are. I hope you've learned something today, and I'll see you next time.